and Packers game one. I'm your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, PurpleTerritoryRadio.com, and Vikesgeist, our social media / message board / chat room. We are part of the Big Heads Media Network now, starting this week, so you'll find all of our shows there. Morning Joe's about the labor, which is going to go live after I am done. Load the box, Vikings on the clock, so on and so forth. I have a lot of notes from the game. I'm not really going to get into it that much. I mean, at least breaking it down that way. That's not really my brand anyway. That's more of an about the labor thing, or maybe Morning Joe's during the week. But yeah, I mean, as somebody who's been a really large supporter of Cousins, I had said during the preseason and offseason, especially after the draft and free agency, that this year he wouldn't have any excuses should things go sideways for him. And I can't really break down today's game in any other way. There were a couple drops, but I said this at halftime, and I'll say it again. There's no reason for him to be playing this way. There's no reason for him to be missing the throws that he made, for him to make that throw on 1st and goal to go ahead after the defense. Yeah, it started slow. It looked bad, but they completely bounced back and shut down Rodgers and the Packers at home. The Vikings offense had way more yards than the Packers did. They had multiple opportunities to win this game. Cousins by himself had 3 turnovers. He, at one point, was 4 for 14 passing. That's just bad. It's bad. Kyle Sloter could have won this game for example. He's not even on the team anymore. It's not just an inability to make the right throws. I mean, there was the touchdown to Diggs where Diggs had to lay out to get it. He could have had that. I mean, there's just so many missed opportunities. But there should have been another turnover. The drive after he threw the pick in the end zone. So it's just bad quarterback play. It's bad, and it's really, really terrifying, because I don't know how at this point they can fix it, either by benching him or otherwise. I don't know how he fixes it. He is probably the most researched and prepared quarterback this team has ever had. It's his life. He's borderlines on obsessive compulsive disorder, the way he prepares. So what does he do to fix this? It's in his head. He had more time. He made bad decisions. When he made the right decision, he wasn't making the throw. It was bad across the board. I don't know how to fix that at this point. I mean, he's going to have to figure it out. It's a one loss. The team wasn't going to go 16-0, blah, 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 but they should have won this game. They very well easily could have, even though they started awfully. It started about as poorly as a game can start. They clawed their way back into it. The defense was amazing but they gave up 21 points to start the game. That's very hard to overcome especially when you have 3 turnovers, all generated, by just bad decisions, bad throws, or the fumble happened to play after he fumbled it a first time, and then he just fumbles it the next. It's just awful. It's so bad. It really, really pisses me off. It's just the thought process was, and I understand why the Vikings went this route with Cousins. With their defense, with a run game, they don't need a Tom Brady to win games. They need a competent game manager, and that's what the Vikings clearly are trying to turn Cousins into. There's multiple comments to start the game by the announcers when the Vikings were down, that they needed to get Cousins more involved. They're not going to be able to catch up if they just keep handing off the ball. But clearly the team doesn't want Cousins to take over the game. They want him to be a component of the offense. Hand off. 10 throws is fine. 20 throws is fine. 50 throws they don't want. That's what they had last season. Cousins played well in some of those games. It's just now they have it. They have the defense playing well. after they spotted him 21 points again, which is very hard to overcome. But any team with this amount of talent on offense and what they've invested to fix up the offensive line this offseason should be able to pick up more than 16 points. There were points left all over the field. There were opportunities left all over the field. And if not for a huge run by Beebe and then a huge run by Cook, God, those 16 points didn't even feel earned, really. It felt more like a couple fluke plays, and outside of that great freaking drive they had when they were running the ball, just discombobulated, just bad. There was no flow. There was nothing. And Cousins has everything that he could have wanted. He has a really good run game. Look what Cook, he had that long run, which skews things, but he was averaging over 8 yards per carry in the end of the third quarter, fourth quarter, and him and Madison were picking up yards on the field. And why do we care so much about a game? Because why wouldn't we? What are you doing here? People care about things. Go to a video about somebody reviewing a video game. People have passions. I'm sure you're into being an assistant manager at Subway. Everyone has their thing. And no, we can't get rid of his contract, JT, unless we were to trade him, which there was a lot of talk this offseason about trade, is how Cousins could end up in Los Angeles and how the Vikings could end up with actually, no, it was Oakland, and how the Vikings could end up with Derek Carr. That's not going to happen. Nobody wants a quarterback that plays like that. Good quarterbacks don't have games like this. This was a meltdown. It was bad. It was bad in every single sense of the word. He did nothing good. That throw to Diggs, very well, the touchdown could have very well been another interception. It was a very risky throw. He had Diggs wide open. The one where Diggs laid out for it, he was turning the ball over. He was fumbling it. He was making bad decisions. And then, like I said earlier, the good decisions he made were offset by bad throws. So I am just completely not enthusiastic about any of this. My optimism is dead. This game was very important. As we saw last year, the Vikings should have won the game in Lambeau last season. They tied. Had they won that game, they would have made the playoffs. Granted, they would have lost in the playoffs, so it doesn't matter. Cousins just can't get it done when it matters, apparently. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't think you can. The only really silver lining is, obviously he can fix it. He can turn it around. I don't know at his age if he's going to be able to do that. There's been articles and shows all talking about his inability to come through when it counts, beating teams with winning records, so on and so forth. I just think he's, exactly what I argued against when they were looking at getting him, and I will eat crow because I know that being a football analyst isn't a very I know it's easy, and I'm not getting mad at people for pointing things out at all. I do it too. But when you're making bold predictions that are recorded, you're going to be wrong more often than you're right in most circumstances. I really thought that with a decent line and with a run game in this defense, that Cousins would be able to put up the 21 points a game that the Vikings needed when they were the defense. With Case Keenum, the defense, I think, gave up 15.8 points per game. Cousins could put up 18, 20 points. Yeah, Alex, I'm just here basically apologizing for all my pro Cousins takes. Can he turn it around? Sure. Will he? I have very low confidence that he will. For a multitude of reasons. That performance was bad on a level of Spurgeon Wynn or Tavares Jackson level bad. It was bad. No, you don't see established good quarterbacks having games like that. You just don't. Tom Brady doesn't just randomly melt down. Drew Brees doesn't do it. Aaron Rodgers doesn't even do it. And he's not that great anymore. Which I think today showed again, despite the strong start. So, silver linings, I don't know, that the Vikings might collapse and end up with a top pick and get a quarterback that can sit behind Cousins for a few games next season. Sure, they can turn it around. It was a 5-point loss. It was in Green Bay. But the way that game was lost, the Vikings didn't, or rather, the Packers did not win that game. The Vikings lost it. They had every opportunity to win that game on offense. The defense started out poorly, but man, did Cousins look awful. And that was my fear after the Falcons game. Was everything looked great, but we didn't see a lot from the passing offense, and I felt like, well, last year the passing offense was the only thing that was good about this team. Cousins and Thielen were breaking records, and that will continue. But something is off with Cousins. The last time we saw him throw the ball more than 10 times was against the Cardinals, and he was 3 of 13 in that game. I think he was 4 of 14 in this game at one point. So he's just, I don't know if he needs to do what the Vikings defense did and take a step back and prepare less and tanking for Tua. Hey man, I'll start throwing that hashtag out there. Especially, I'm going to the game next Sunday. If they lose next Sunday against the Raiders, man. If you hear about someone in the stands spontaneously combusting, that's me. Yeah. I had all these notes about talking about the way that the defense stepped up, and they did. But there's also no excuse for spotting a team 21 points. But it doesn't matter because it could have been a 17-point game and we still would have lost. Cousins played so bad. I cannot even. I'm in shock, so I'm not even that angry. But now that it's sinking in, and I actually have to go and do life things. I would have been so happy. Why did he throw that ball on 1st and goal? Why would you do that? Well, I don't understand it. And then when he makes the right decisions, he doesn't connect on the throw, and then he fumbles. 2 plays in a row. Oh, man. God. I said this at halftime, and I was kidding, but I'm going to start making random, not even random, because I'm explaining it so it wouldn't be random, but really hyper negative, the Vikings are going to lose by 50 points because everything I write seems to blow up in my face. This Cousins thing, man, I put so much credibility on the line for it, and that's such a selfish reason to be upset for this game. But I am just really, really, really at a loss right now. I don't know how you fix that. And then I worry that if he turns it around somehow, and I know he's going to have all these post-game quotes that were run by some team of marketing experts on what to say, and it wasn't good enough and up to his own standards. Well, your standards don't exist, clearly, because you keep playing this way. So I don't want to hear your professional response as to, hitting the whiteboard and doing better. You are making you had the biggest contract in league history up until that point. You need to do better. And I know you're trying, but it's not good enough. It just isn't. On every single measurable level, the eye test too. It's bad. It's just bad. And this isn't good. A good post-game breakdown. It might be an emotional breakdown, but I don't. So if he turns it around and the Vikings go 14-2 or 15-1 and win out, I will have zero confidence when the playoffs start that Cousins will get it done. I just will. I don't trust him. I don't. And the Packers aren't a good team. They're not that great. The Bears game showed that. And they came in asleep on both sides of the ball. 21-0. They claw their way back. The defense completely shut down the Packers offense. 21 points to Green Bay at home isn't a lot either. But again, they had every opportunity to win this game. And Cousins single-handedly ruined that. I got hit by this realization on the play where after the touchdown in the end zone, when Cousins threw that ball and Thielen jumped and tried to play defense on it, and the guy, I forget the name of the guy covering him because I was bleeding internally from rage, that he dropped the game-ending interception. I remember thinking, oh my God, Thielen's probably thinking, like, what is going on here? Like, I'm basically playing defense because my quarterback is this off base. He's just off. And it just occurred to me, like, wow, like, he's a liability. Cousins is playing like a liability, and you never want to hear that from the guy that you gave $30 million a year to. And I kind of got off on a tangent, but the reason the Vikings thought that if they had a guy who could make deep throws down the field in Cousins, because his accuracy supposedly is so great down the field, that they would have a more complete team and a better chance than they did with Case Keenum. So they had the defense. Now, last season was weird. The defense was awful to start. Cousins was good. But then when it mattered, he and teams shut down, he couldn't do it. My theory was you put him in the right system, he can be a good to elite system guy. If you want to call a system guy a game manager, I'm comfortable with that as well. That didn't happen today. They have the run game that they've always wanted. Cousins was on fire, Madison was, and Cousins is doing everything he can to sabotage this team subconsciously or just through lack of ability. He just is. He can't. I'm being very repetitive, and I apologize, but he's turning the ball over. He's making bad decisions. When he makes the right decision, he isn't making the throws. What are we to take away from that? I mean, look at all these notes I have. Who cares? It doesn't matter. None of that matters. The quarterback gets paid that amount of money because of the importance of the position. It'd be like having a goalie in hockey that has narcolepsy and falls asleep and leaves the goal wide open. You can't have your most important player single-handedly doing everything wrong. Everything wrong. Whether it's decisions, making bad throws. He looked like he did in the Cardinals game, and I was a little bit. The taste was removed from my mouth surgically last week, but I was still concerned by the 10 throws, thinking, okay, Cousins is going to have to air it out. But the good news is that he was so great against the Packers last year, and this is the perfect opportunity for him to, kind of ease into throwing the ball more than 20 times. And it just was awful. It was awful. And this is coming from a guy who probably the only time I've raised my voice on a podcast was defending Kirk Cousins right before they ended up picking him up, because I assumed they would draft some interior offensive linemen with Berger retiring, and they didn't. And I used that as a crutch. And I said, well, he didn't have any time, and he played well to start the season. And now he'll have time, and he'll have a run game, and look what he'll be able to do with Kubiak and these two tight end sets and throwing screens, and him and Thielen have a connection, and then Diggs will be there, and they have the best supporting cast of wide receivers they've had in years, and so on and so forth. And it just today was a meltdown. There's no other way to put it. I'm almost happy that I'm not writing an article about it and that Mr. Joe Oberle's doing the game wrap, because mine would be all caps and very not safe for work, and probably printed off and used as my admission papers for a 72-hour psychiatric hold. I will respond to Turd Ferguson. Thank you for bringing that up, and also I love that username. That might be one of my top 5 SNL moments ever. I'm a big Norm Macdonald fan. I talked about that at halftime, but the refs were god-awful too. I mean, there was the Linville Joseph sack that he had on Rodgers. He was being held as egregiously as possible. Now, he overcame it, but there was no flag there. They talked all week about Zimmer talked about being on this committee with Tom Coughlin and how Coughlin put this video together of teams disproportionately not getting holding calls, and Zimmer basically said that the majority of it was Packers related and that it was so long they had to turn it off. And a lot of people were saying, well, they flagged the Packers 3 times against the Bears for holding, and that they're turning the tide and blah blah blah. That's not the case at all. They got so many calls or no calls. And then I said this at halftime, so for those of you that heard this, I apologize. But I've been repeating myself consistently this entire show, so it doesn't really matter. For the announcer to say about that play, because they were reviewing it they weren't reviewing it for pass interference. They were reviewing it because it was a touchdown, and they review every scoring play. In the process of looking at whether or not he scored that touchdown, it was obviously a touchdown. They then made a secondary decision to call pass interference for blocking or picking or whatever you want to call it. The announcer, this is what infuriates me. The announcer said nobody thought of that possibility when they were debating whether or not to implement this rule. You can't have a sport this big, this like hegemon of a sport that just envelops everything that makes $10 billion a year, and then you have these ancillary consequences to these gigantic rule changes. Beyond that, it felt like this game was very slow. There was one point where the announcer said something sarcastically about a punt return late in the game. No flags, because there was so many flags. Baseball is trying to really limit how long and slow games are. With the amount of trips to the mound, and batters can't readjust their molecular structure every time they swing, like Chuck Knobloch used to do. He used to like tie each shoe, put his gloves back on, do his taxes, and then he would like swing, miss, and then do it all over again. It was one of the main reasons I hated baseball, and still do. And now football's turning into baseball. Every play, there's like 20 minutes in between. I'm gonna die of lung cancer because of it. And point being, though, that you can't do these rule changes, and that's not that hard of a thing to think about. It's not like it was such a rare occurrence that it was impossible for that committee to have foreseen it happening. They just are it's a level of hubris or stupidity or both, where they do these decisions and then they don't realize what's going to come of it. They didn't realize that at some point, since every single touchdown is reviewed, they'll be able to overturn touchdowns on pass interference calls that what's his face, the quote unquote expert that Fox calls all the time. He's like, yeah, that wasn't a penalty. I wouldn't have flagged that. And of course he wouldn't have, because it didn't get flagged at the time because it wasn't a penalty. But when you look at things through slow motion and 50 different angles, you can find those calls all the time. That having been said, even if that, I guess if they would have gotten those 4 points and then the field goal by Bailey, they would have been ahead. I was going to say it wouldn't have mattered, but I was thinking about the field goal and the extra points. Now, Bailey, on top of it, that's a problem. That is something that just slipped my mind because of how bad Cousins played. But, it's a 47-yard field goal. It's not a gimme. The block, Diggs should know better. I don't know why he decided to take his helmet off like that. I would be mad about it if it came down to the extra point, which it didn't. But Bailey needs to do better, and if things continue this way, I'll explain to you a little bit more about my thoughts on Bailey. I had someone from his camp email me about an article on our network that was very, very angry about it, and kind of gave me an idea as to what his theory is on what things are or why they are the way they are. And I said I wouldn't repeat what we emailed about, or at least say who they were. But I did have confidence in Bailey. I did think that Prefer was awful. I wrote an article about firing him. I never write fire people articles. And I thought Marwan Malouf and bringing in Nate Kading, which I've heard, they hired him, and I haven't heard a single thing from him since. I don't know where he's at, or even if that's helpful. I get the general thought from Bailey's camp that having somebody like that over your shoulder wouldn't be helpful. But what's to be in Bailey's defense? They make way too many changes. They bring in kickers. They switch around holders. They cut the veteran long snapper, bring in cutting with a week to go. These guys need more than a week to prepare for the season. They need to basically live together and finish each other's sentences. You can't just keep making these changes. But that's not why they lost the game either. I cannot disagree with any of you guys. Josh, Mr. Ferguson. Thank you, dude. I am having an awful time. I don't feign emotion for clicks or to be like Paul Allen and be insecure that he's not from Minnesota, so he has to scream about every little thing to prove how much of a fan he is, even though if he ended up in Arizona or Houston, he would be just as happy and yell just as much. Deshaun Watson is loose. I would not do that. So when I'm upset, I'm upset. And point being, your username made me feel a little less crappy. So I'm gonna have to watch that skit when I get off of here, which I'm about to do. Thanks guys for tuning in. About the labor, we'll be on with their post game show here within a half hour, I assume. I will be doing more videos this week for the smoke break. We will be recording Morning Joe's, my podcast, Tuesday or Wednesday morning at 9:30. Again, we did just join the Big Heads Media Network for all of our podcasts, so it won't change how you guys experience the show. You just might notice a little bit more professionalism coming from it. But you'll still be able to find it everywhere that you do, social media or Spotify or iHeartRadio or so on and so forth. Turd Ferguson's making my day. All right, I'm off. I believe I'm going to the Renaissance Festival for the first time in my entire life. So if you hear about someone uppercutting a horse or something, that's me. Keep an eye on Vikings territory, purple PTSD. See, back in the day when this happened, before I owned this network, I used to block out all Vikings news and media until Wednesday. And there's times like this where I really wonder why I decided to do this as a potential career. It's just I'm really, really down about it, and I don't see how you fix it at this point. They're too far invested. It's just Cousins is too messed up. That was the worst game of his career, Vikings career. It was awful. It was so bad. I just can't. I can already hear Joe Oberle saying on Morning Joe's, "What, you played for the Big Ten?" And look at my girlfriend was a Packers fan, and she's converting for me, and she did her nails, and she got a Vikings shirt, and look at that. And now we have to cut her fingers off. Show me your hood.
Oh yeah, you guys can get this at Target in the teen section because not everybody.
It's actually it's a onesie.
Oh, I shouldn't say it. Little person, excuse me.
Topic for the next show. What is more offensive, little person or? Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you'll give my girlfriend a pass on her slurs because of her skin tone.
Oh no, I'm like high yellow right now.
Oh no.
Look at my pictures from April.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bye.
All right, I'll end this, and might be back later with some more thoughts, but I'll try to do a few shows this week, and hopefully you guys will continue to tune in despite the product on the field. Thanks again, guys. I'll catch you next time.